Hello everyone, welcome to the CW DCTV weekly review. Before I delve into this week's video, I just want to say, I didn't mention this last week, but these videos will be filled with spoilers. So let's start off this week with Episode 10 of Season 2 of Supergirl, titled We Can Be Heroes. And in this episode, we got a few things happening. We got to see Livewire once again, who was in an episode last season. I believe it was the crossover between The Flash and Supergirl. That was a fun episode. And now she is broken out of prison and she is the main antagonist in this week's episode. But it's not so much about her, it's about what's happening with Kara and the people around her. And what is happening is that she finally knows that Guardian is Jimmy Olsen, who is being aided by Wynn in doing all of his vigilante activities. And she's kind of taken aback about this. She's taken aback in the sense that seemingly everyone around her kind of knew, well, mostly just Alex, but she's kind of the last one to know, so she feels kind of betrayed by that. Also, she obviously has concerns about Jimmy Olsen and Wynn doing this type of stuff because it is extremely dangerous. But there was a lovely scene between her and Jimmy where Jimmy basically tells her why he's doing what he's doing. He's tired of being a sidekick, he's tired of just hanging out with superheroes, kind of being on the sidelines, and he wants to be more active. And he is also kind of jealous of Mon-El. I think that's more apparent in this episode than in previous ones. Also, we have to remember that he did have a lot of personal romantic feelings for Kara, specifically back in Season 1 and at the beginning of this season as well. Also, John Jones now has to deal with Miguel Moores, who has had this type of psychological attack and is apparently slowly dying, and there is really nothing they can do about it. What ends up happening, of course, is that he ends up pairing up with her psychologically and going into her mind and seeing what is happening. And what we find out is that the White Martians are contacting her, are finding out where she is and kind of attacking her psychologically, and they are indeed coming. Once again, I am really glad we are opening up this whole alien world. We're seeing a lot of different alien life and alien creatures, and this is tied directly to John Jones. As we all know, John Jones's people were essentially wiped out by these superior white Martians. He's going to want to get some type of retribution because of that. Also, we got to see John Jones kind of warm up more to Miguel Moores, kind of realize she is not the same type of white Martian that he remembers them to be. She is kind of benevolent, which is apparently is a complete difference from what the white Martians are typically. We also got to see the relationship between Supergirl and Mon-El take a few turns in this episode. We got to see him now become part of the DEO team, or the Supergirl team, and go out on a mission with them when they went to take care of Livewire. And what we saw is that Mon-El is very rusty when it comes to this. He is very much a rookie when it comes to these type of situations. He doesn't have the experience that Supergirl has, or even Guardian has. So that leads to a kind of strain between Supergirl and Mon-El's relationship, which we've seen happen before, but this one is different. This one takes a more revealing turn in the sense that Mon-El finally reveals his romantic feelings towards Supergirl. Now, I understand that this is kind of a CW trope where these romances happen all the time. I personally don't like it, but it is what it is. While the episode didn't really deal with Cadmus or LexCorp or anything like that, it was an overall good episode, and I think a better episode than the previous one. It's not quite a filler episode in the sense you did get some advancement with the relationships between the characters, which I do really like. So overall, a good episode of Supergirl. Moving on to The Flash, which is Season 3, Episode 11, titled Dead or Alive. And this was a very interesting episode, and this was an episode I really liked. If you remember at the end of the last episode, this interdimensional bounty hunter shows up and she's after HR. And what we find out in this episode is that it is illegal on Earth-19 for interdimensional travel, I guess without the proper verification or paperwork or whatever. So he is essentially a refugee and a criminal on the run. and the bounty hunter that is looking for him is Gypsy. And what we learn about Gypsy is that she seemingly has the same powers as Cisco. She can vibe, she can travel through dimensions through her powers, which is really very cool. Also, she seems to be much more advanced in her powers than Cisco. And that was a really cool aspect of this episode, is we got to see what Cisco's powers can really do. We got to see what he can do with his powers. He's kind of been holding back, but in this episode, he goes full out. And it was really awesome to see Cisco take that next step as Vibe. It was also interesting that Cisco would kind of go up to bat for HR. HR and Cisco have this interesting relationship where Cisco is constantly questioning what his role is on this team, what his role is on this Earth, and whether he actually fits here or should just go back to Earth 19. What we learn in this episode by the end is that HR cannot go back to Earth 19. As far as the people on Earth 19 know, he is dead. Gypsy has found him and killed him. That was the result of this battle to the death between Cisco and Gypsy. Another thing we learned in this episode is that Cisco still has a penchant for falling for women who are complicated, to say the least. Sometimes they're bad guys, sometimes they're just unavailable, whatever the case is. He seems to have a penchant for falling for these types of women. But while that took up the bulk of the episode, which I really liked that aspect of, we got this other kind of thing between Wally and Iris. Iris is out looking for these drug traffickers or something like that. Seemingly she is still a journalist, which was surprising to me, and I think it was surprising to many people watching the show because we really haven't seen her do any type of journalistic work in a while. And that was kind of new or old information to me. But she is out looking for these drug dealers and she enlists Wally to help catch them. And what was the most interesting aspect of that is she now knows that she's going to be killed by Savitar in several months. So therefore she doesn't believe that she can die any other way. Which is a really fascinating thing when you think about the way time works, the way fate works, and things of that nature. If she's indeed fated to be killed by Savitar in several months, does that mean she cannot die before then? Which I tend to believe that's not true, but she doesn't believe that at all, and in this episode we see her literally walk up to a gun and basically dare someone to shoot her, which was extremely reckless and something that you would probably find Lois Lane doing. That is an avenue I thought they would take with Iris, as they would make her more like Lois Lane, specifically when they introduced the whole journalist aspect to it. But they really kind of dropped the ball when it comes to that. Overall, I have to say, I really like this episode of Flash. I like that we got to see another interdimensional character. We got to see someone from another Earth, which I thought was really cool to see. Hopefully they do that a lot more. I really like this Gypsy character. Hopefully they bring her back. But now we are moving on to Arrow. This is episode 11 of season 5, titled Second Chances. And in this episode we get introduced to the new Black Canary, or someone they want to be the new Black Canary. And what is the most interesting aspect of this episode for me is how dark it felt, how season 1 it felt. I've said this all season long. This season feels so much like season 1 in every way, and this episode is yet another case for that to be true. This Black Canary has a dark backstory. She was an undercover cop who was tortured when the particle accelerator exploded. So that is how she got her canary scream powers, which is kind of cool to have a Black Canary with those powers already intact. And what we also learned in this episode is she has a dark streak in her. She is out for vengeance because while she was being tortured, also her partner was captured and I believe killed in this particle accelerator explosion as well. And what we find out is that she is very willing to take a life. And that was what I really liked about this episode so much, is that this new Black Canary is not a clean character. She is someone who is going to be a very interesting addition to this team. There was a specific moment at the end of the episode where Barry essentially told her, you don't have to be a killer, you don't have to do this, you are not past saving. And in most comic book television series so far, the character will relent. They will give up and say, you know, you're right, here's the gun, whatever. But no, in this moment, she killed the guy. She got her revenge. That was very different than what we are used to seeing. But with that aspect of the episode aside, we got more development when it came to John Diggle and him being in prison. And what we find out in this episode is that there is, I guess, a hidden cache of files or dirt on this general character who is framing John. And in this episode, Felicity is trying to find that stuff or re-find it. And she ends up running into kind of a hacker group, kind of connecting back to her roots. If you remember in a flashback episode they had before, is that Felicity used to be a career hacker, if you will. She used to be part of a hacking group, or at least part of that society. This could lead to her getting back into it, getting back into what she kind of does best, and that is computer hacking. It's also interesting that she's kind of a legend in that community. That was a cool aspect of the episode, and also hopefully this opens up an avenue for Felicity to do more things, or for them to do more with her character, because right now I feel like she's kind of in a holding pattern. They tried that whole thing with her moving on from Oliver and having a new boyfriend, but then they killed off the boyfriend, so now she's kind of just stuck. But the results of that is that John Diggle is now free, which I'm glad that they've wrapped this up now and not waited and dragged this on for too long, because this has kind of been dragging on now since the beginning of the season, and we're about halfway into the season, so let's move on and have John do some more things, you know, come back to the team, his name is now cleared, come back to his family, and let's move on from this. I like the flashbacks with Talia al Ghul we got in this episode. You can see that she is part of the League of Assassins, and in this episode they work together to take down some type of Russian crime boss or something like that, some Russian drug trafficker. And I'm really liking where that relationship is going with Talia al Ghul. You don't just introduce Talia al Ghul into this season for her not to play a big part. Specifically her connection to Nissa al Ghul and Ra's al Ghul, and perhaps Sarah as well. So overall, I really liked the episode of Arrow this week. Granted, we didn't get any more advancement when it came to the Prometheus character, but we did get a lot of advancement when it came to Team Arrow. Now moving on, I'm going to talk about Legends of Tomorrow. This is episode 10 of season 2, titled Legion of Doom. And in the last episode, we got to know that this term refers to Eobard Thawne, Malcolm Merlyn, and Damien Darhk, and they were featured in this episode quite heavily, more so than I remember them being featured in any episode before. I could be wrong about that though. And what was also interesting about this episode is that we got to see what they were doing, but we also got to see what the Legends were doing as well, and they never crossed paths with each other. Usually in these episodes, they're kind of fighting one another. In this episode, we just got to see what was developing in each group, which I liked a lot. I'm glad we finally got to see what Damien Darhk, Eobard Thawne, and Malcolm Merlyn are up to. All of them are trying to change their specific timelines. As we know, Damien Darhk dies, Malcolm Merlyn loses a hand, is no longer Ra's al Ghul, and Eobard Thawne is kind of erased from existence due to the end of season 1 of The Flash. So they're all trying to fix their existence, and they believe that they can do it through this Spear of Destiny, which they are trying to find the parts to, but since they no longer have this amulet, they cannot find these parts. But what they do have is they have Captain Rip Hunter, but this Rip Hunter doesn't have the memories that they need. So they have to either restore his memories or find his memories somewhere, and indeed they do. They go to a Swiss bank where seemingly Rip Hunter has all of his memories on this kind of data disk. You would think that it would be a little bit more secure than just in a bank vault, but it's Legends of Tomorrow. You really can't fault them for that. Now having access to Rip Hunter's memories and implementing them back into him, that's going to change things going forward, specifically for the next episode. But what is going on with the Legends in this episode is that they have that amulet, that relic, that is a compass to where all of the pieces of the Spear of Destiny are, but they don't know how to access it. So Professor Stein decides to go get his extremely bright and intelligent daughter, but unfortunately she is a time aberration and she does not know it. But she finds out in this episode that she is. And then we come to the moment where Professor Stein really has to have a heart-to-heart with her. I thought that was a great moment for that character. It's something that I think he's been battling with all along this season, his new feelings for his daughter he never knew he had or never existed before, and he's now fully embracing those feelings, and he does not view her as a time aberration anymore. That is his daughter. That is really heartwarming, and it's a really good character moment for him. But it is also a problem I think is going to have to be addressed later on, because I think there's going to become a time where Professor Stein's going to have to choose whether she exists or doesn't exist, whether he's going to have to fix his mistake or not. That's probably going to happen somewhere down the line. That's going to be a difficult thing for him to do. But with both of these groups doing various things, it felt like a relative setup episode for the next one, when they are obviously going to interact with one another and they're going to fight with one another. Legends of Tomorrow continues to be lots of fun. This episode I found to be extremely fun. So this has been the CW DCTV weekly review. If you like this video, please check out my other episode reviews, as well as the other videos on my channel.